The concept for Epartrade is basically, in my opinion, there's a big hole in the internet. So the internet started many years ago, but there's never been an online business community for racers on the World Wide Web. The need for Epartrade is actually quite obvious. Basically, people in the business of auto racing need a place online to hang out and get their problems solved.
It's extremely simple for a buyer or for a supplier to interact on the platform. The first thing you need to do is sign in, which is free. And the second thing is, when you see a product that you're interested in, all you need to do is click on request more information. If it's a company, you click on request more information, and then from there, it is forwarded directly to the buyer or to the supplier.
You can go to epartrade.com, you become part of a community of businesses in racing, and it makes sourcing products much easier than just on the internet or using Google.
At Epartrade, there is no e-commerce. It's literally a connection just like at a trade show. So now, any time of the year, a buyer could reach out to a supplier through an email.
More than that, it's a place to go just to keep current every day. So it's a good place to start your workday in your racing business or in your offices of your professional race team. And you know you're current when it comes to new technology, industry news, technical papers, technical videos, all of that and more. We're not looking for a million hits per day. All we want is people who are really the volume buyers of racing products in the racing industry to be part of the little world of Epartrade. We have racing businesses participating from around the world. So you get suppliers from around the world, you get buyers from around the world.
Epartrade really eliminates having to travel, closing down your shop. Now you have a place to showcase globally your racing product and technology.
Good morning. I am Francisque Savignan, the founder and CEO of Epartrade, the global online platform for the performance and racing industry. Welcome to Race Industry Now, the technical and business webinar series from Epartrade, presented to you by ARP. This is episode 124, and we're going to be talking to the people from Peterson Fluid Systems. With me this morning is Judy Keane, the co-founder of Epartrade, and the one and only wonderful Jeff Hammond. How are you guys doing today?
I mean, why do you say this? Why does he say this to us? Huh?
Because you're wonderful, Jeff. You know, I mean, who else can say we have a host, that three-time NASCAR Cup champion, crew chief, and crew chief from the SRX. I mean, you're a legend. So we're very happy to have you with us, and you have hosted so many. So we're glad.
I think the most important thing is you're being very kind to me, and I think it's funny that we're making Judy laugh at both of us. You know, put a smile on her face first thing in the morning, so that's a good thing.
Pick Jeff on the spot.
I'm excited about being here today and the product that we're getting ready to discuss. You know, with the Peterson folks. I mean, the way I look at it, if you're gonna move fluid on a high performance vehicle, and some of the, believe it or not, I think some of the other automotive as well as industrial products around the world, they look to Peterson for direction because they do a great job of doing that and managing all the different things that you need for it. So I'm really excited to get a chance to pick their brains.
Absolutely. And Judy is visiting North Carolina.
Yes, I'm in Jeff's neck of the woods, just visiting a whole bunch of engine builders, fabricators, race teams around the area here. In fact, I was at the races this past weekend where Jeff was not. And saw a lot of, it was like a reunion after so much time not being at a race. But so many people came up and gave their condolences about John Kilroy and what a beautiful tribute he wrote. His son wrote to John. So yeah, it was touching, and we're very thankful to everybody that sent out any emails or texts to us. We're grateful.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all very much. So before we start, we have a short little video from Peterson. So our producer will run that little introduction video from Peterson, and then we'll bring Pat on, and then Jeff, you'll take over. So I'm getting a signal from Reed Kennedy, our producer. So we're going to be launching shortly this little video. you're on.
All right, Francis. Good morning, Pat. How are you today, sir?
Good, sir. How are you?
I'm doing really well. Great little video introduction to what we're going to get an opportunity to kind of break down and discuss in detail. But first and foremost, being involved in the business as long as I have been, I just can't say thank you enough for the quality. And I love sitting there watching those guys right there. Y'all run some of the prettiest beads I've ever seen in a welding shop in my entire life when it comes to y'all's product. I mean, just an outstanding job, and the engineering that you guys have done throughout the years. I remember back in the day when we really got off into moving oil tanks around in NASCAR. We didn't have a source to go to, so we were trying to build them ourselves. And man, that was a disaster and a challenge, and leaking. I mean, just what I'm saying, all the doors we opened that we didn't need to open. And when you guys stepped in, I mean, it made life a lot easier in that part of it. But more importantly, what you were able to do for the engine side of it too, man. Just my hat's off to you from one end to the other.
I appreciate it.
So where do you want to jump off into, my friend? Because it's just, there's so much about your company that I don't know where you want to start.
I mean, really the easiest place to probably start on the oil pump side of things with the innovations that we've done there is with the twisted four lobe design. There's other companies that'll do a lobe rotor design through the scavenge sections of the oil pump, but we're actually the only company that does it at the pressure section of the oil pump as well. The benefits to that are we took a similar to what looks like a Roots blower gear and turned it into an oil pump, so the volume is substantial. As engines have progressed, oils have gotten better. Engines require more oil flow than they did 10 years ago. Dirt late model engines were a main focus and still are a main focus for us. We do a lot of drag race, a lot of off-road trophy truck, diesel pull applications, high RPM truck pull applications, all over the spectrum of motorsports. So we've kind of had to keep the design of the pumps moving forward to keep up with the requirements of these engines as they've gotten higher horsepower, longer duration. They expect parts to last longer. They expect parts to fatigue less. So all of that's kind of what's pushed our innovation as far as what's these rotors kind of have become. That's the main part of what's kind of differentiated our products and our pumps from others in the industry. So.
Well, I think that's pretty unique because again, everybody talks about how do you separate the man from the boys, and when you pick that up, I mean, I think that's the heart of what makes that Peterson product so extraordinary, because everything you touched on and what that does also, I think, is at one time, you remember when we first started with dry sumps and stuff, is foaming the oil because the way everything worked. I mean, it started, making it froth and everything like that. And you guys came along here and really kind of revolutionized everything in such a way that problem is not there. And I think that, correct me if I'm wrong, I know back in the good old days, if you wanted to turn 8,000 RPM, you had to have 80 plus PSI of oil pressure, because you need to make sure you got everything covered correctly. And now,
That's the old
where's it at?
The old rule of thumb for sure. But,
yeah,
but like I say, oils
now it's way down.
Yeah, oils have come a long way since then. Now you really try to fit the oil pressure basically more in a range. I mean, if we have extreme applications like pro stock drag race and comp eliminator, where those guys want 30 or 40 pounds of oil pressure at 10,000 RPM, but those engines are designed to survive and they're maintained to survive at that interval. And then you get to like a dirt late model or a NASCAR application where you guys are at 8,500 RPM, and really anywhere between 60 and 80, 60 and 90 is your motor's going to stay alive and be perfectly fine. And that's a big part of that is how far the oils have come in terms of longevity and what they're able to withstand over the last 5-10 years, really.
Well, I know that, you know, in looking at through some of your product line, the one thing that kind of caught my eye was your latest, you know, priming system, the ability not to have to pull everything, you know, apart. And it's like, now, why didn't I think of that? You know, I might have made a little bit of coin. I could have possibly sold that to Peterson or something, but no, I think that's such a great benefit to all of those who now think that's the number one thing you got to do, in which everybody, that's kind of like that's the number 1 or 2 rule in engines. You know, you never crank that some gun up till you get some oil through the engine before you ever put any kind of power down.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, you only have to forget to put that belt on once and it gets real expensive real fast. The primer's been a very good product for us. I actually have one sitting right here. This is one of our large mounts. This is what we do on a lot of diesel pull applications, truck pull, dirt late model applications. This is the most common filter mount for that style of racing. But it's with the cost of race engines nowadays, spending $400 or $500 on an item that's going to save you thousands of dollars in push rod tips and rocker arms and all of that, it pays for itself in no time, and engine builders love them.
When I look at something like that and knowing where you guys have come from, how do y'all go about innovating? I mean, where do y'all get your creative ideas? Because again, you know, Peterson is the ultimate plumbing source when it comes to engines and cars and, you know, about anything. I mean, coming and going. But where do you guys, I mean, how do y'all go about coming up with something like that? Because we've been, and you know, spending oil forever and a day, and everybody had their own little gimmick about how you pull the belt off and you do everything here. And now all of a sudden somebody says, okay, well, we need to figure out a way to not have to do that, you know.
Correct.
I mean, was there a certain moment that somebody called you and said, look, you know, they left the belt loose and we got to come up with a way to fix this?
Every time you get that phone call, it's not a good one. But really, a lot of the influence to design the primer product came from our heavy involvement in the dirt late model, the Lucas Oil dirt late model series. A lot of the big dirt late model engine builders were on us because they want those, the dirt late model bell housings. They're not easy to work on. You got to disassemble half the car to get the belt off. So it's not an easy process to do in the pits. So that kind of gave us the idea that there's an opportunity for a product where we can make some people's lives easier. We can extend the longevity of engines, cut down on wear and tear for $60,000-$70,000 race engines, and do the engine builders a favor. We can sell some parts and we can take care of customers and give them a product that's going to suit their needs.
You know, you mentioned Lucas Oil, and you also, through our early conversation here, you've referred, you know, to the oil and everything. Do y'all have a working relationship with the major oil companies, you know, so you can, you know, put their product in your pumps to try to see if any of it has an effect on anything that you have internally? Or is it, how do you go about, you know, doing that? Or is it just kind of like everybody's stuff is so good?
A lot of everybody's stuff is come so far and it's similar. We get a lot of feedback from engine builders. When they're on the dyno getting beat on, and then when they're going around the racetrack, we get feedback from engine builders. And that's the most valuable form of information you can get, because that's real world, real experience. That's what your product is living in. So if it's doing what it's supposed to in that environment, it's going to do it everywhere else. So
Well, we've already got a couple, got a guy, Rich Tomei, I should say, is already looking at and has a question for you.
Sure.
He said, can you talk about the difference between a standard volume and a high volume and a high pressure oil pump? And how do you choose from those three?
So our standard pressure is a 1.2 inch rotor. I would say that's probably the most common rotor that's used in probably 70 or 80% of our applications. The 1.4 high volume rotor, we typically will only put them in all aluminum dirt late model motors that need 20 gallons a minute of oil, diesel pull truck applications that are up over 30 gallons a minute of oil, or a super high horsepower, 3,500 horsepower screw blown drag car with, 4,500 rod and main clearance, and they want 100 pounds of oil pressure going down the racetrack. That's the high volume rotor it moves fluid. You can bury a motor in oil pressure if you oversize the rotor. And the 1.2 is a little more maneuverable as far as flow rate. You can tailor it by bypass spring pressure for the top end. You can do feed line size changes to taper oil pressure. You can do, in worst cases, you can go to a remote relief valve that will bypass excess oil pressure. But a lot of it is application specific. And when we set up the system for the customer, we just have to get all the details. If the engine's all aluminum, if they're running valve spring sprayers, wrist pin squirters, if the engine has turbos on it, those add 2 to 4 gallons a minute, depending on the restrictor size in the line. Every pump is configured to that particular application for that customer. There's not really a one size fits all. There is in some aspects where if an engine builder is building the same engine over and over and over, and he's got an engine package that this is what he sells, we have a pump, or we can configure a pump that will fit that application for him every time he sells it. But when it comes to the drag race, has a lot of variety in it. Road race cars have quite a bit of variety in them. The off-road trophy trucks have a fair bit of variety in them. So those, we kind of tailor the pump to the application more. Whereas the dirt and asphalt cars, we've got that so dialed in and figured out that we know what combination we have is going to work best for them just immediately. So there's not a whole lot of thought or ability or changes that go into the pump in that aspect.
So, I mean, you went right down the alley that I was looking to go to, because it's like, it sounds like I can pick the phone up, call you and say, I've got this, 100%. And I need to know, what do you recommend? And you can blueprint it. And if they walk in there and they're creating a new monster, it's okay. You know, 100%. you can work hand in hand with them and develop that blueprint so that the next guy that calls, you may already have it done for somebody else. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. There's the good example of that is a lot of higher end drag race motors are going to what's called a gear driven application, where it's a pro charged application that's gear driven off of the crankshaft snout. We've designed and are designing an entire new way of driving the pump with a 3/8 male hex on the end of the shaft that keys into a gear drive just for that application. So that's a perfect example of what you're saying. It's a trend in engine building that we're filling and suiting a need to based off of what our customers need and what our engine builders need.
So does that also include a recommendation on oil coolers and stuff like that, so that you don't restrict what you've tried to create, and the numbers that everybody determines is part of this system?
Yeah, we have a couple suppliers that we send a lot of business to for coolers that we've had very good success with. CNR Racing and Fluidine are the two that we send a ton of business to, in terms of their cores work well, they're efficient, they don't have a ton of pressure drop. They're not gonna they're not going to cost you a race car motor because of a restricted cooler or because they have some issue. They make great parts. So we send customers their way all the time.
Also, when you're developing your tanks for this 4A system,
Sure.
do y'all give the recommendation as far as, you know, when you get done, how much, I think what I'm trying to say is head clearance from where the oil level needs to be, an amount of space you need to the top of the tank?
Yeah, and that's designed into every tank that's dictated by the spinning height. Usually what dictates tank size more than anything is the chassis in most applications. I mean, it's got to fit in the car. So the capacity thing, we basically tell people, give us the box size that you need us to fit this in. Give me measurements, you know, length, width, height, how much room we have to work with, and let me see how much capacity I can get into that area for you. And it's the same thing. We've done it for so long, and we have so many designs of tanks that I know right off the top of my head, if you have a 430 cubic inch all aluminum dirt late model motor, you're going to get a 4-gallon filter tank. That's the tank that's in 99% of those applications. Drag race, you're anywhere between 2 to 3 gallons. Off-road trophy trucks, 3 to 5 gallons, depending on duration and what the chassis dictates for size. Trophy trucks, or like truck pull applications, diesel pull trucks, 4 to 5 gallons is pretty much the standard for those guys. And road race, it's really all over the place. It depends on the length of the race and how much heat's going to be built up in the oil. And the chassis limitations are always a huge consideration for those guys, because they have tons and tons and tons of, you know, coolers and plumbing and all of that in a small restricted area. So trying to find a space for a tank isn't always the easiest thing in those.
Yeah. I know I think we already touched on this, but I don't want to ignore Bill's question. He said, like, last week's webinar was about lubrication and lubricants with modal. Does oil selection affect an oil pump recommendation? And what we touched on a moment ago, it doesn't really matter, because if it's good quality, your stuff handles it, right?
Well, yeah, the quality of the oil, it's not really a concern any longer. The viscosity is.
Okay.
Depending, I mean, if you've got a drag race motor that runs 0-20 weight, super lightweight oil, and what his requirements are for oil pressure is going to influence the size of rotor that I put in that pump to meet that pressure requirement. Whereas if I'm in a diesel pull truck application and he's running 2050 or heavier, we're going to build pressure with that all day long, no problem. So I can vary my rotor recommendation based off of the weight of the oil. It does play a factor. So
you keep talking about, you know, your rotor recommendation. Can you show us, you know, a little bit of what the differences would be, or give us an explanation of that? Because you've referred to that a couple of times. I know it's the design, what you're talking about. So
we do
first
three
off, you know,
different.
what are we talking about?
We do three. All of our rotors are the same diameter. They have to fit in a pocket in the body, with, you know, a certain tolerance factored into rotor to wall and through the center and all of that tolerance. But where we dictate the volume is the length of the rotor. The longer the rotor, the more volume they move. The shorter the rotor, the less volume they move. We have 3 different options for rotors. We have a 1-inch that I do in a fair amount of import builds. A lot of the Subarus, the Mitsubishis, some of the 4-cylinder Toyota motors, stuff like that, we'll do a 1-inch rotor in, just because their oil consumption isn't massive. I can meet all of their needs with a 1-inch rotor and not be pushing, you know, an excessive amount through the bypass, asking too much from the relief. And then we have a 1.2, which we consider our standard. So that's 1.2 inches long. And then we have a 1.4 inch, which is our high volume. And it's also our drag rotor in our scavenge sections. So that's our high vacuum rotor in our drag pumps.
So the variety and the types of racing dictate as far as the stages and how everything kind of interacts.
100%.
Now, I know at one time early on, some engine builders, they'd want an extra, scavenge. They wanted to try to play with some different stuff.
Sure.
Have y'all, when y'all work with those engine builders, is that, you ever try to talk these guys out of doing that because you know that you don't need it? I mean, based off of some of the, I'm trying to say, can you help engine builders that maybe don't quite understand and maybe they're kind of stepping outside of their knowledge about especially the pumps?
That's what we're here for.
Okay.
I'm never going to tell an engine builder not to do something. I mean, if they want to wheel and deal and try things on their engines, I'm all for it. That's how you learn, and that's how you make your products better. That's kind of where innovation comes from. I'm never going to tell anybody not to try something. And that's, we've built some crazy pumps off for people that want to try things. And some of them have worked awesome and some of them haven't, but you don't know unless you build them and you see if they work or not. So, but no, we're anytime an engine builder has any questions, oil related for us as to what they're doing and what they need, we're here 5 days a week, 40 hours a week for them. So.
Well, along the same line, I also have understood that you guys have teamed up with Star Machine for a wet vac pump. So can you shed a little bit of light on that?
So I was the guinea pig for that pump. I had the first version on my own personal drag car for about 1.5 years before we released it out to the public. So I put just under 200 laps on it in 2 years to make sure A, it met our requirements, B, my engine builder was happy with how the engine looked when we took it apart, make sure that we didn't have any problems, because if we wanted issues, we wanted it to happen on my stuff so that I can figure out what's going on and address the problem. Basically what the Star Machine pump is it's a newer version of a pump that we sold previously. It's our wet vac. We used to do a pump that had a pressure section and 2 vacuum sections integrated into the pump, but we ended up the same thing. Engines have progressed so far and people's demands for vacuum have increased so much. Back in the late 90s, 5 to 8 inches of vacuum was a lot. And now with ring packages and what engine builders are requiring from a vacuum standpoint, we needed to change the design and update it so that it kind of kept up with where engines are going. Basically what the physical pump is you have a single stage oil pump, and then we have one of Star's Sportsman vacuum pumps that has a hex that keys into the back of our pump, and it's all ran by one shaft. The vacuum pump has its own adjustable relief on it, so you can control and regulate the amount of vacuum directly on the pump. As far as the performance goes, it's awesome. I've had that pump at sea level on my own car on my race pack, and it pulled 20 inches of vacuum with the relief closed. So it gets busy.
Now, on some of these products like this that you have created, like the one you're referring to right now,
Sure.
do you ever see, or have you ever had other types of, I guess, automotive people or industrial people look at your stuff to use on other products that are not just necessarily, high performance, what you specialize in?
Sure. Yeah, I've done oil pumps for power plant applications where it's just a circulation pump out of a generator. Our parts end up all over the place. We have ball valves that are in aerospace. We have ball valves that are being used all over the place. Primers are being used in a lot of like over the road trucks on Kenworths and stuff that'll sit in a lot for a month before they go. So they'll go out and prime the whole oil system before they fire the truck. Same thing with construction equipment, those big cats. They're starting to get into some of the primers. So yeah, our products are used outside of the racing industry. It's just the racing industry is kind of where our bread and butter is. So.
So you mentioned the aerospace industry. So you're working with I guess the FAA or whatever, whoever has to look at a part and say that that's applicable or whatever.
We've done a little bit of work with some of the prototype stuff for it's actually foreign companies that are using them in I believe military applications. But they use the valves for it's a cooling, I believe it's used in a cooling system on a drone, essentially.
Okay. So like I say, once again, another unique application that's a byproduct of high performance design. So
Sure.
that just makes it that much more intriguing, I think,
Sure.
as far as that's concerned. You know, I was looking over your shoulder at the picture hanging on the wall of that, I believe correctly, that's a drifting car.
Correct.
Over your shoulder.
Yep.
Through all of this stuff, as far as we talked about coolers, we talked about, how everything you make, is designed on flow and volume and all of how it interacts.
Mhm.
Do you have the capability? Is there a gauge out there now in the industry where when you put your car together that you could check the flow rate? Because, and my point is, we know what your pump does. We know what through your mount, should do and everything. And we going through the coolers, but a lot of times it's the lines between the engine and the tank that sometimes get overlooked.
Mhm.
And people have a tendency to create a restriction either on the return or, on the primary feed line.
Sure.
How do you get around that without, because sometimes this having pressure is not necessarily going to tell you you've got a problem before you jack the RPM up on the thing.
Correct. And a lot of that is the main issue that we usually see there is line sizing. Lines being too small on the feed side of the
Mhm.
pump will cause an issue. Having incorrect filtration in incorrect locations causes big problems. We have guys that'll put too restrictive of a filter in the feed line to a pump, which is a no-no. We have a scavenge filter, essentially. It's a 1500 micron screen, so it's just under 1/8 of an inch. That's designed to go into those lines, and it's just meant to keep big debris from getting into the pump that would cause it to lock up. But you don't want to run any sort of a fine micron filter in the supply line. If you're worried about keeping the tank clean and the pump clean, do it on the return side. That way, all of the oil coming out of the pump going to the tank is filtered and clean. The tank's always clean, the pressure section of the pump's always clean, and you're achieving the same thing, but you're not causing any ill effects or restrictions in the system when you do it that way. So
We've been focusing a lot on the oil and the primers and stuff there. Want to talk a little bit about what are you doing with people as far as even like the fuel systems and stuff like that we find on today's high performance stuff? What are you working in that area? And now that they've gotten away from I call it the mechanical pump that used to bolt directly to the block.
sure.
More people are going to, electric. They're going to still being driven out of the, off the engine. I'm saying they got a lot of different varieties, and
Sure.
you've got pumps for that too.
Yeah, we've got filters for them. We still do a fair bit of work with NASCAR with Penske and Haas and a couple other of the teams on fuel filters for those guys. We do a 10 micron cellulose element that's primarily a fuel injection fuel filter. It's fine with race gas, pump gas, E85, all of that's perfectly fine with it. And then we also still obviously do a whole lot with hot rod guys that are built street rods, race cars, obviously still. And it's the same thing. You can call us, we can spec out a filter for you, tell you what micron filter you need, give you all the dimensions of the product to make sure that it's going to fit, it's going to be able to work for you. But we've got a variety of elements. We've got a 10 micron, a 45, a 60, and 100 in our 600 series fuel filters, and that's the primary 4 elements that we pick from. So
as always, Pat, you got it covered, man. Just real
Right.
quick, because it brings up this question for you. How long have you been in this position and, working on this kind of stuff? Because again, this is just sometimes, it's so remarkable, the stuff y'all guys keep coming up with.
I've been with the company for going on 12 years now.
12 years.
Yep. So I've done, like I say, I've seen and been around pretty much everything, and I've been lucky enough to have incredibly intelligent, smart people that trained me when I got hired to make sure that I understood the ins and outs of everything, and that I wasn't afraid to ask a question and learn what I needed to know. So I've been fortunate in that aspect for sure.
Well, and again, I'm curious, because did you come in as like a general laborer, or were you a machinist, or were you have an engine builder background? I mean,
I've raced since I was 16. I've
There you
been a
go.
drag racer since I was 16, so I've been involved in it. I came into the company and I was in sales. We were a small family-owned company, so you had to wear a lot of hats. Sales did assembly. You're running around the building doing all kinds of jobs. So you got a real solid grasp of what parts were where, how stuff was made, how everything kind of functioned together. And you were working with the people that were making the stuff. So they were always willing and helpful to explain to you what was going on, and then when parts were done, and then why they were made this way, and that kind of thing. So that was super helpful.
Well, for all of our attendees today, I just want to remind you, we're just a little bit past halfway as far as our webinar is concerned. We'd like to thank ARP for being a part of this program, but I also want to remind you, you've had a couple of folks, ask questions early on. Hey, if you got a question, speak up. You got a comment, speak up, because that's what Pat's here for. And again, there's no question that's a dumb question. It's only a question that's dumb that you didn't ask it. So please, don't miss this opportunity to, excuse what I'm going to say here, Pat, but let's try to stump Pat. You know what I'm trying to say? So I don't think we can, but it'll be interesting to see. Now, see, we asked that question, and all of a sudden we've already got a couple of takers. And Bill wants to know, can you talk about some of your filters, and are they new innovations coming up in that area, I guess, or any place?
In filters, not so much, just because we already do a stainless reusable element. We've done that for 15 years, 20 years. That hasn't changed. We've been in that market and in that area, and our products work so well that we haven't done a whole lot of changes to them, just because they work so well. We don't want to make them worse.
If it ain't broke, don't fix
Not broke,
it.
don't fix, exactly.
Yeah.
But as far as filters go, we do 3 different series of filters. We have a 700 series, which is a lot of your small carburetor filters. They'll screw into the bowls of carburetors and have a little 60 micron element in them to keep the carb bowls clean, keep needle and seats from getting stuck, and any sort of debris from getting into carbs. We do a 600 series filter that's a 2-inch body by about 6 inches long, if I remember correctly. That's primarily used as fuel filters in street rods, race cars, depending on the amount of fuel that you're trying to flow. We also have the 400 series that we can do oil or fuel with either, depending on the element that's installed in the filter. Typically an oil filter in my 400 series, depending on rod and main clearances and what the engine dictates, most of them are a 60 micron. That's a 2.5 thousandths particle that's allowed to pass. That's usually plenty tight to get through anything in the motor without hurting bearings. We have a 75 micron and 100 micron for that one as well as a 10 micron. We have a 10 micron and a 45 that are both primarily used for fuel in the 400 series, but they're for applications that need to flow fuel. A lot of alcohol, methanol applications go to the 400 series just because the pressure drop between my 600 series to my 400 series is pretty substantial. The element of the 400 series filter is almost the size of a 600 series filter. So there's a lot more surface area and there's a lot less pressure drop on the 400 series element versus kind of the 600 series. So.
Sounds good. We have a guy that I'm gonna butcher his name, so I'm gonna keep my mouth shut. But he's asking a question about, how do you avoid basically not picking the right type of oil tank design for like an off-road car, and the products he has worked it with and everything like that, that they have issues with frequent pressure drops. And,
Yeah, I've been through this.
You got a smile on your face here, like you know what's going on here.
So
Okay.
we do any off-road application, whether it be like a stadium truck or a trophy truck or anything like that. We have a special type of baffling that gets installed into, we can put it in any oil tank. It gets installed into the tank, and it's specially designed to keep the oil from being able to come up the center tube and get away from the pickup in the bottom of the tank. It's a special type of baffling that we install in the center tube that keeps the oil kind of compressed on top of the pickup when the truck's going through, whoops or undulations or jumps or something like that. So
it's kind of like we've been talking, just got to pick that phone up and call Peterson and get to fix to what you got an issue with.
absolutely.
Steve would like to know, what are the advantages of a dry sump oiling system?
That's the $1 million question. Really, the biggest advantage is oil control. Instead of storing the oil in a pan that's in hurricane-like forces with the crankshaft spinning around at 8,000 RPM, trying to whip the oil into a froth, the oil is contained in a much more calm environment inside the tank. In a dry sump system, there's little to no oil in the pan, very little. Eventually, the pan will get cleared, and the pump will actually start pulling a vacuum inside of the engine when there's no oil left. And that's where the performance benefit comes from, is being able to run a lower depth pan, less windage in the crankcase, pulling a vacuum on the motor, being able to control, basically not allowing oil to hide the engine, being able to scavenge it front, middle, and rear in the pan, being able to scavenge a lifter valley, being able to scavenge out of cylinder heads, just making sure that all of the oil is getting back to the tank and that the system is flowing, a consistent amount of oil all the time. It's also a temperature thing. The tank allows a little bit of a cooling aspect to happen. There's also, we've got a tank sitting here, but you guys can probably see there's two different kind of baffles in here. There's an umbrella up here. So the oil comes in, swirls around the tank, it hits this umbrella up here, goes through that umbrella and deaerates. So that's what separates all of the air bubbles out of the oil. And that's what gets you solid, clean oil down at your pickup point. This is a center umbrella. So this is mainly there for oil control. This is to stop oil from coming up the sides with G-force, and to keep the oil kind of packed down around the bottom of the oil tank. So this is kind of the heart of the dry sump system, because this is what keeps the oil clean and in obviously deaerated, non-frothy, usable condition, I guess is the best way to explain it.
Well, and again, I made mention, I've been around long enough. We were going through, wet sumps to dry sump systems. And I know the things that part of that education was real quick, being able to put oil where it needs oil so it doesn't starve itself inadvertently.
Correct.
And the other thing, like you say, the temperature, oil temperature itself, being able to keep it better controlled.
Correct. Correct.
And if you're racing in NASCAR or any place where downforce or aero can help you out, you run more tape on the front. So, it's all of those little benefits. And I think the other thing is like, we learned really quick is how much better your engine looks when you take it apart.
Absolutely.
I mean, everything there about it. If you lubricate it correctly, your bearings are going to look better. Everything's going to look better. Cylinder walls, the whole 9 yards, it all works. It's just, like I say, it's a big system. And when you do it right, especially with your product, because again, you guys have addressed so many different things that have always been a byproduct of not being done correctly in an oil tank to begin with. And it's the same way with your pumps. I want to continue this conversation on. Mr. Garcia wanted to know about increase of oil pressure in a pump from 60 pounds in a standard pressure to 80 pounds, and it's supposedly in a NASCAR truck. Would it be beneficial in terms of temperature and performance?
Increasing pressure be beneficial? It depends. When you run increased pressure, you're also cycling oil through the system at a faster rate. So that can negatively influence your temperature, which can also negatively influence your pressure, because as oil gets hotter, it's going to build less pressure. More oil pressure is not always the solution. It's the right amount of oil pressure for the application is what you're after. We have guys call all the time that'll ask us, if I'm running 90 pounds, what if I drop it to 70? Is it going to gain horsepower? It's a negligible amount. And it's a variable. Excuse me. It's a moving target, because the amount of horsepower it takes to spin that pump is a moving target. That depends on how full every scavenge section is of oil, on how hard the pressure section's pushing the relief. All of that load dictates the amount of horsepower it takes to drive that pump. Whereas when like our test stand is built with a 10 horsepower motor. That's what we test all of our pumps with. So I can pretty much safely say all of our pumps take less than 10 horsepower to run. The only, excuse me, the only pump that can stall our test stand is a 6-stage pump when we have every single section slammed full of oil, which is a rare occurrence. But the amount of horsepower that it takes to run a pump, like I say, it's a moving target depending on what's going on in the oil pan and what's going on in the system at that particular moment. So
speaking of that, Michael wanted to know, can you improve the air release properties in the oil with your system? I guess is what he's asking.
Most of that's done in the tank. Most of that's done in the baffling that I spoke to. That's the primary device that's used to de-aerate and separate air from oil and get solid oil back down to your pickup in the tank. There are other pump suppliers that use a de-aeration device. They function kind of like a blood centrifuge. It spins circular on the back of the pump and separates it that way. We've never dove into that aspect of it just because our tanks do essentially the same job. So
here's one that's a little bit of a strange question, but I'm gonna try to ask it because it kind of puzzles me a little bit too. Is there a future for the turbo within the incorporation of hybrid or battery powered systems along the race engine side?
I'm not sure how to answer that one.
I've been sitting there reading it 2 or 3 times, and I'm a little bit the same way. And I figured, well, maybe you know something I don't know.
Maybe
I'm
when
not trying to be
start ending up in race cars, we'll have to figure something out for that. But thankfully, that's not a thing so far.
No, I agree with you. Like I said, we got about really 5-6 minutes here left, and I know I want to ask you about this. Peterson products are made in the USA.
Yes, sir.
How important is that to you and everybody that works at Peterson?
It's incredibly
And
important.
what kind of pride comes out of that? Because I know you guys sell products internationally,
Yeah.
around the world.
Yeah, our parts go Australia, New Zealand, Europe, I mean, South Africa, all over the place, but we're proud to be a USA supplier, USA manufactured and all done in the United States. It's a big point of pride for us, so.
We had, thank you for that. And at the same time, you know, we had somebody ask questions about innovations. We saw one of them, which was the primer. What's the next challenge for Pat and everybody as far as the engineering part of Peterson right now? Where you guys got your focus, or what's coming up? You know, we're going to maybe learn about during the off season, or if there is an off season.
We've got a few products that we're working on. A couple new drive options for us. Some updates to previous parts to make them better, nicer, more functional, easier for the customer to work on. And that's where I think we'll probably be headed, is refining our product line a little bit further. Just making updates to parts to make them more functional, easier to work on, easier to use, and more helpful to the customer and the end user, I think is where a lot of our focus is going to be. So.
Okay. When it comes to, you mentioned early on in the program about how you were working on keeping product and extending the life of product. Is there a recommendation? I mean, I'm pretty sure I'm gonna get an answer. I know the answer, but I'm gonna ask it anyway. Is there a golden rule when it comes to pumps and oil tanks, as far as how long can you expect to run them? I mean, is this something where once you get one of these oil tanks, you can run it till, you know, either you sell the car or crash the car or do something to it to where, you know, it's not one of those kind of things you got to take it out and throw it away every year?
No, oil tanks last forever. We make replacement parts for oil tanks. If you ding a bottom up on one, we'll build you a new bottom. We do that all the time. We service our products. We don't expect people to always have to buy new. Oil tanks last forever. They'll last the duration and lifetime of the vehicle usually. Oil pumps, usually we'll tell people when the engine's out for a freshen up and you're looking over that, just send us the pump and let us go through it and make sure that it's all nice and fresh for when the motor's brand new, that you've got the pump all fresh and redone, ready to go as well.
Well, I hate to say this, but I'm starting to run out of questions for you, because, man, you've answered all of them so efficiently and everything. And as I said in the very beginning, it's just amazing where your company, you know, got involved and how you have just kind of like took charge of that, as I say, the plumbing of a high performance vehicle from stem to stern.
Sure.
I don't know of any part that you guys don't address and can't help with. I mean, that's the thing I love about it. It's like one-stop shopping, and you got people that are working with you. You mentioned, you know, the radiator companies and the oil cooler companies, you know, the ones you recommend, they're great partners.
Sure.
And we all know that if you live in the high performance world, you know, you're passing out great information. So you're there for your customers and everything. So it's just
Sure.
really excited to have you a part of the Epartrade family. And at the same time, I see Judy's back on, and Francis is chomping at the bit, I think, to get in here and help us out. So I really appreciate your time. It's been a pleasure to pick your brain. And if I've missed something, please share it with us before we end our little webinar.
Only thing that I have is we just came out with a brand new 2022-23 catalog. You can get them off of our website through a dealer. We'll have a PDF available on our website to download as well if you choose that route. This will have all of our updated parts, pieces, part numbers, everything in it. So this will make your life easier. If you're calling us, it can reference a part number. We can look it up immediately for you, tell you cost, lead time, whether it's going to work for your application, everything. So that catalog's a great asset for customers, engine builders, suppliers, everybody. So.
Well, like I said, Pat, it's been a
Jump in
pleasure.
there.
And I think right there. What's that?
So I just want to remind everybody, we have catalogs on this platform. So we'll have that on the Peterson profile.
Perfect.
Okay.
Absolutely. And we pushed actually Pat's product back on the home. So again, thank you very much for being with us today. The webinar has been recorded. It will be posted later on the Epartrade platform, as well as on YouTube channel. We will be back next Wednesday. We're going to be talking suspension with competition suspension, especially with a focus on short track racing. So, please join us again next week. The host will be Brad Gilly. So again, Pat, everyone at Peterson, thank you very much for being with us today. I know you were a little bit under the radar, so thank you, Pat, to make the effort to do a great presentation with us. Thank you very much, and let's go racing.
Thank you.
Registering on Epartrade is easy. Fill out your name, email, phone number, and create a secure password. Next, select your business type. Choose supplier if you're looking to display products or services and connect with buyers. Choose racing business if you're looking to find new parts and connect with suppliers. Choose race team if you own or are a member of a professional racing team. Begin typing your company name. We most likely already have your company in our database, which you can select from the drop-down. Then, enter your job title. Choose Claim Company if you'll be editing your company profile. Other members of your company can choose Join Company if they'd like to use Epartrade as well. You can view and agree to our terms of use here. If you'd like to receive our weekly newsletter, choose Accept. Click Register Now, and your registration will be submitted for approval. You'll need to confirm your email once it goes through. To keep our platform industry only, you'll be approved shortly after. If we require additional proof of business, we'll reach out. Welcome to Epartrade.